so I'm here today with the famous Michael Anderson, who started the OM617 Swaps group on Facebook. What do you got, like 4,000 plus subscribers now?
Pretty famous.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. But you have people that aren't familiar with it, because I get people coming in from the outside all the time. There's a wealth of information there. There's a whole file section. A lot you can learn just by joining the group and doing a little bit of research. But today, I'm fortunate enough to visit him here in Florida and checking out his rig. I think you said you've been building this about 8 years now?
It's been running with this swap for about 8 years, yeah.
8 years, okay. So it's an OM617, and why don't you tell us about it? Tell us about your rig here, what you did.
Yeah, it all started, like I said, almost 10 years ago. I looked for a small four-wheel drive capable four-door vehicle you could take your family out in that was diesel. And I went on a journey to look for one, and there wasn't one. So I thought about importing something like a Toyota, and that wasn't an option. So then I started looking at diesel options, and the Cummins just ended up being too heavy for what I wanted. So I ended up on Mercedes, and I found out about the 617 from the 80s, and almost 10 years ago I bought a W123 second owner car, and I bought it just for the engine. Settled on the 617, looked like power to weight ratio was good, and the rest is history, right? It's been a labor of love ever since. A lot of renditions of this engine in this Jeep, but basically it's been running with the 617 for about 8 years.
So let's dig into that. You said there's been several renditions. I believe you started with an HX30.
Yeah, so, first it was a factory. The problem with the Cherokee is hood space, right? It doesn't have a lot of hood space. Even the 4.0 was redesigned to fit in this hood. Chrysler said they wanted a 4.0. The 4.0 engineer said lengthen the hood. Chrysler said we're not going to do that. So the 4.0 engineers went through great lengths to put all the accessories on the sides of the engines. Basically, the block is almost on the radiator. So it's a challenge getting this engine in this platform. So a lot of renditions of oil pan, right? It's got a front sump oil pan, got a problem with clearances with the front with the front axle. So there's a lot of rendition of oil pan renditions and different things. I've probably pulled this engine out like eight times, just getting it right, getting everything correct. A lot of those was getting the shift points correct in the transmission. But yeah, started with an HX30. Everyone was recommending HX30 based on maps. There wasn't a lot of research on these when I started doing this in North America. I think there was only 2 other guys, a guy by the name of Vlado online, and a guy by the name of Hulk Green. I had the pleasure of meeting one of those guys. But there wasn't a lot of information. The HX30 looked like a good option. So we went with HX30, and pretty laggy. 5,000 mile round trip to Michigan, Drummond Island. HX30 served its purpose. At that point, it had a top mount air-to-air intercooler. Still was able to maintain highway speeds pulling a camping trailer, a small camping trailer. So it was a good combination, but the numbers started getting crunched, and a lot of aftermarket guys were talking about the HE221 and I talked to you about the HE220, bounced it off you and a couple other people regarding its maps and how it matched this application. It looked like a better application than HX30, and I was a big pusher of the HX30, if you remember.
I do.
Solid turbo.
Proven combination.
Whole
Been
sets,
around a while now.
Exactly. Whole sets in general, very, very solid turbo. Every UPS truck from the era has HX30, right? And those things are driving crazy. So, but we settled on the HE221, then I decided on a 7 centimeter based on the I think it's a 7 centimeter squared is how they measure it on on this one. Decided based on the maps that the bigger one would be better for this one, because this is kind of more of a high performance. I really kind of pushed the 7.5 millimeter pump to its max in this. So we decided on the bigger one, and it turns out it was a great combination. As far as you're concerned, Build-BenzForce provided the turbo, which was great. I mean, you guys provided great turbo service. Had it to my door very quickly, very reasonable priced. But to be fair, the HX30 is not the HX221 is not something you produced. Right. But what was special about you guys was once I received my turbo from you, you had a nice drain that worked very well for me, and that was something you produced in-house, correct?
We have it manufactured exclusively for Build-BenzForce, correct?
Exactly. So that was something that was very special to this. I got the 221 from you. Very reasonable price. Your drain worked fantastic for my custom application, and I had bought a turbo adapter, your general eBay turbo adapter online. I intended to use it to mount the 221 to this engine, and I got talking to you, and you said you had your own adapter, and I said, well, I'll buy one, send it to me. So not knowing which one I would need, because I believe you said yours was a lot thinner, and I didn't want to push my turbo out any farther, because you see I'm very limited for space. So you sent me your turbo adapter, and I will have to say, it was a beautiful piece.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the one you got was manufactured in Louisiana. We were using the manufacturer down there at the time. So definitely made in the USA. Yeah.
Literally took my eBay one, which most people use. It looked like it worked great, but there was no transition to it. It was just blocks, right? And it was pretty wide. And your piece was, I think, almost just like an inch. And it came with all the hardware. I didn't have any problem with it. It was super nice to be able to buy something for a 30-year-old engine and just be able to install it. You know, like I said, when I first started with this, every piece I literally had to make on a drill press and an angle grinder. So it's nice to be alive in the ancient Mercedes world to be able to buy an off-the-shelf part and just install it. It's unheard of.
Awesome. I'm glad it worked out for you. Another thing I think you got was a wastegate bracket. So a little bit of effort went on that, trying to get the preload just right. But good. I'm glad that worked out. You got a couple other things I think people would really be interested in, and I did not ask you before this, which I should have. You're running an end pump over there.
I'm running an end pump.
Do you know what fuel level you're at?
I do. I feel actually, so GoRan stamps them on the top, and I think this is 170.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. So, I mean, we can talk about that. That's a whole nother episode, honestly.
Right.
M pump versus MW. There are some significant benefits to an M pump. The MW pump is technically a more advanced pump. The governor is actually a more advanced mechanism. The governor used to advance fueling is it's more advanced in the MW, but the M pump has a special place in performance, especially if it's all-out performance. There's some really big benefits to it. One being it's quite a bit shorter than the MW. A lot of people don't know this, so it's quite a bit shorter than the MW, so you can actually swap it in and out without pulling your oil filter housing, which for some is a big deal. The M pump produces more fuel. The max fuel on the M pump, if you were going for total horsepower, the M pump is where it's at. What else about it? The M pump most of the time can have an external ALDA. Totally adjustable external ALDA. You can set max fuel, minimum fuel, maximum fuel when the fuel is released, right? Minimum maximums on that, so it's extremely adjustable. Idle is 100% adjustable from outside through the governor, not just an idle stop screw, it actually inside's got a little. So definitely some benefits to the M pump. The problem is they're super rare.
Right, and I mean, we obviously didn't build this pump, but that's what we run into all the time. One is they're hard to get, but when you do build an M pump, the fueling, you can get a lot more, the adjustability, that's the win with the M pump all day long. MW pump, people want a ton of fuel, but you just can't get there. In fact, I don't think we have many pumps out there over 100 cc's because you want even pressure across all the valve there. So.
That's right. You know, and the truth is, I mean, if people are truthful for themselves. So this pump right here, I cannot produce enough boost. I actually have this turned way down. So I'm making 30 pounds of boost, right, which is actually about the limit for the rods on a 617. That's the safe limit, about 30 psi. I cannot produce more than that without separate rods. I cannot match the fueling in this with my boost. So even though I have all this extra fuel, I can't use it. I would have to push 40, 45 psi, compound turbo setup, much bigger intercooler setup. And you know, who really wants to do that?
Right.
So honestly, the benefit of an M pump, depending who you are, what you want, maybe it's not for you.
Exactly.
You know, so this is literally maxed out. No matter what you do, the max acceptable boost, continuous boost on a 617 is 30 psi, right? You can fuel it past that. You're just creating heat. So I mean, the M pump is kind of a mute point when it comes to that, honestly. But if you had a drift car or something, twin turbo, giant intercooler in the trunk, maybe the M pump's for you.
So What would you change about your rig? I imagine you're always going to be changing your rig, but what are the immediate things on your list you would like to do differently?
For this application?
For any application.
For any application.
Well, I mean, for Michael Anderson living life with this vehicle right now, is there anything on your list to do?
Absolutely. The thorn in my flesh from the beginning on this swap, and I don't think I'm alone. The aftermarket world seems to be suffering the same thing, is starter choice, right? The starters that come with many of these adapter kits are undersized. Even the underdriven, the gear reduction starters that they use are undersized. Therefore, a Chevy mini starter, a gear reduction starter is for 14-to-1 compression, which sounds pretty good, right? But this is a 21.5 or 21-to-1 compression. They don't live very nice lives. They don't live long lives. They're not efficient as far as battery cable sizing. They just suck. And I'm not alone. The aftermarket suffers with starters on these engines. And I'm in Florida, so I can imagine how this problem is bigger somewhere in a colder climate. Probably horrible. So yeah, the number one thing I think I would change, if I could change, would be that starter.
Along the way, I mean, you've leaned on BenzForce. Really appreciate your business. Anything I can do to help, I would appreciate that. But what do you think BenzForce could do to change things up, other than the starter, to help you out? What do we need to do different to meet the market demands?
Different? For me, on a personal note, not a whole lot. Everything I've bought from you guys has come with beautiful hardware. It was a bolt-on application, which thank you for, right? I have to grind something out myself. So I would just say keep producing the quality parts you're producing. Make sure the parts you produce follow the quality you've been doing so far. Like I said, it's not too pleasure to buy a part for something that's been out of production for 20 years and just be able to bolt it on. Like it's a Roush or Chevy part. It's nice. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So all right. So next, you got some exciting things coming up. Are you going to start a OM606 swaps group?
Yeah, so I showed you my 606 in the shop, right? And I got the LJ.
Yeah.
And we talked about that a little bit. Yeah, I don't know I'm going to start a 606 group. There's a lot of information out there already. A lot of Europeans on there, a lot of Finnish race companies that have way more knowledge on the 606 than I do. So I don't know if it would be beneficial for me to start an actual page.
But there's not a Michael Anderson page.
There's not a Michael Anderson page. I'm really I'm not that big a deal, honestly. At the time I started doing this, there wasn't a lot of info out there, but now.
So we've talked about that. I'm going to interrupt you a minute. The quality of the information online is actually really important, and I deal with this hours every day. People will ask me questions. I read this in this forum. Is that true? Friday, I told you some guy called and wanted a 1,000 horsepower 606. Didn't want to really put any money in it. It doesn't happen. But he reads things online. He'll see a YouTube 1,000 horsepower Supra with a 606 or whatever, and so much misinformation. And I think the 617 swaps group, you guys have really held that group to a pretty high standard. And there's a lot of misinformation in some of the other 606 groups. And
we've got a lot of flack for that.
A lot of trolls.
Yeah, Rodney. As you know, right? We got a lot of flack for that. A lot of information, a lot of Facebook dyno information out there. My uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, mailmen did it, so therefore it's good. Right. And it's probably the reason our group isn't bigger. But we try to actually pride ourselves on just factual information. And like this, I've had this thing out of here 9 times, right? A lot of times when I say something, it's not because I guessed at it. I've literally done it. It was wrong. I've had to redo it 9 times. I'm really not the best engine builder, but I've been there and I've done it, and I try to pass that information on. And a couple other guys on the forum who are administrators, such as Edward, Edward, right?
Yeah.
He does the same thing, and sometimes we come across as jerks because one of us have done it, the information's out there, the Germans have done it, it's in the factory service manual, and we just don't like when we try to veer away from that. We love people trying to experiment. We love experimentation if you know what you're getting into. Give you an example, such as adjusting your own Bosch German pump, right? There is no adjustment on this should be a whole nother webcast, right?
Yeah.
There's no adjustment on a Bosch German pump. You can't make an orifice bigger by adjusting it. Its choke point is that. But explaining that to people that it's not a P pump, you can't turn a screw and turn up the fuel on this pump. You wouldn't believe the amount of hate we have telling people you can't do that. And it's not that we don't want them to have fun, right?
I would disagree, because everybody that calls me can remove their rack limiter and get their pump to like 400 horsepower.
That's amazing. And 36 miles per gallon.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
So there's a lot of misinformation. You're right. There's actually some knockoff groups of the 617 swaps page that just got mad and literally copied our name just because of this. But anyways, back to the 606. I don't think we were going to start a 606.
Okay. Well, I asked that you at least think about it. Again, it's quality control on the information, I think. The admins on the 617 page have done a really good job amongst yourself, and you can always use another group, especially one you can trust, and bounce things off of people without getting a lot of hate, right?
In the future, if we debate doing that, or we decide to do it, I think what we'll end up doing is possibly changing the name to 617 swaps to include 606s and keep the same group. We've had a real good core group of people there for years. We've had that page for years, helped a lot of people. So if we can add some 606 information to that one, I think in the future that might be something we might do.
Right on.
But I'll promise you that I will catalog and record the swap and the LJ.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's all I got. You got anything for me?
Appreciate you coming to visit me in sunny Florida.
Very nice to meet you, Mr. Michael Anderson.
Absolutely.
And thanks for watching.